Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here at the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host, Brice, back at it again to talk about all things basketball with you today on the podcast. And this is a huge free agency episode. All the free agent news that have happened this past weekend, we're going to get into on the podcast. Trades also happen, teams getting better, teams getting worse, teams surprisingly losing players, teams not surprisingly losing players. We have all that right here today on the podcast. A lot of action. Thank you for tuning in. Letting me be a part of your day here at GSMC. You know, free agency, man. It's just always, one of the most exciting times of the year in basketball to me, because the fact of just you think you know, but you really don't know. You really get to see what players value what at what time. Listen, what a player may have valued 5 years ago when they hit free agency may be different now. You've seen that with a couple of moves that were made. Sometimes you got your championships and now you want your money. So you're going to go for the money, even though it does not guarantee you maybe the best chance to win the championship. Maybe you feel like you're that big of a difference maker on a team. All that comes into the decision of a basketball player when trying to decide where they want to go, where they want to end up when it comes to leaving and going to another team. We saw moves that, like I said, were surprising. Maybe some people thought a certain player would leave, and they didn't. They actually signed back. Some other people maybe sat there and said, hey, maybe they feel like they're not going to get him. I mean, these are all things that happen. So we're going to get on that today. We're going to get into the Lakers. Lakers made a lot of moves. The defending champs made a lot of moves. We're going to discuss the moves that the Lakers have made. Are there any more moves left to be made? We're also going to talk about the Clippers, the other LAT, because they made a few moves as well, and a surprising loss as well. We're going to talk about the Hawks today. Hawks making a lot of moves. They now look like a perennial playoff team with Trae Young, a lot of new additions. Now they're waiting on one more player, and they basically went and spent all their cash. But there is one player on the Hawks currently on there that could be on the move that a lot of teams may be after. We're also going to talk about trades that happened. There were some small trades that happened over the weekend. We're going to talk about still free agents that are available, where they're waiting on what potentially they could be trying to do and why their decision is being delayed. All of that and more here on the podcast. Thank you for tuning in once again. So we're going to go ahead and hop right into it. And we're going to get into the Lakers. The Lakers were a very, very active team this year in free agency. Rob Pelinka said, we are not standing pat. We're going to try to change this team and get better. Some people wonder, could they still be as successful losing some of the people they lost? Because let's talk about some of the people they lost. They lost their center. Some people feel like the best big man they had outside of Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard. People feel like Dwight Howard, the way his energy, rebounding, blocking shots, the putbacks, he was their best guy at that outside of Anthony Davis. And they feel like he's a big loss in that regard. They feel like him taking the money, going to Philadelphia and everything, what will that front court look like for the Lakers? Well, the Lakers did make additions to help make up for the loss of Dwight Howard. They signed Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol left the Toronto Raptors, is now going to Los Angeles. His brother Pau Gasol used to play with the Lakers back in the early 2010s, late 2000s, won a couple of championships with Kobe. Now his younger brother is going to LA, now gets a chance to win championships with LeBron and AD. And, he's not athletic in terms of a Dwight Howard, but he's a guy who can stretch the floor, a good leader. Marc Gasol is, people forget, is one of the best passers in the NBA as a big man. People forget that because we're so focused on the Joker and his passing ability that we forget Marc Gasol is just as gifted as a passer. So he has some playmaking ability from the center position, So he's a guy if they have to go against a team like Denver, you could throw Marc Gasol in there and have him go against Joker one-on-one, a guy who you can go man-to-man with him one-on-one, size-wise, weight-wise, and give a body in front of Joker to really have to deal with. They also signed, and the surprising move from their rival Clippers, Montrezl Harrell signed with the Lakers for 2 years, I believe, $17 million, I believe. I'll have to recheck that, but not a lot of money. Not a lot of money. And you sit there and you think to yourself, well, how did that happen? How did that happen? Like, really? Because people are wondering, getting Montrezl. Why would Montrezl Harrell leave? Why would he leave the Clippers and go to his rivals? And it's 2 years, $19 million. 2 years, $19 million, because I want to be correct. 2 years, $19 million he signed for with the Lakers. But people are thinking, well, the Clippers couldn't give him that? You would think the Clippers could give him that. So why did he go to the Clippers? Could it be, the rumors we heard during the season, him getting into it with Paul George, him not liking the fact Kawhi was able to take games off and take practices off and show up late without consequences? You never know. That really might have ate at Montrezl. And he said, you know what? Yeah, I like Ty and everything like that, and y'all are a good team, but I just, that rubbed me the wrong way. And then seeing what the Lakers did, how really the Lakers were the true dogs of that playoffs, how they fought, he may have said, I feel like I fit in better here than I do there. And I think that may be true. Because now, because this is the thing that this does with the Lakers in their small ball lineup. Let's say Anthony Davis has foul trouble, or Anthony Davis, we all know Anthony Davis does not want to play the center position. It would be weird to say this, but you could put Montrezl at the 5 and then put AD still at the 4. It's technically small ball because Montrezl is only 6'6", 6'7" in a way. Defensively, you could have Anthony Davis guarding the center, but offensively, he's playing the 4. And, you could still have LeBron, even though he's basically bigger than Montrezl too. Maybe, Caruso, Schroeder, that could be your small ball lineup, even though their small ball lineup is sort of a bigger lineup, but a more athletic lineup in the way. And so I think with that being known, that's a very good offensive lineup. You got Schroeder who can light you up. LeBron, we know what he could do. Harrell, it could be a beast in the paint. Anthony Davis could be a beast in the paint. And so you really look at the way this team has just changed and made adjustments. They really became a better team because of that. And then they traded away JaVale McGee. So, they added Trez, they added Marc Gasol. Then they traded away JaVale McGee and lost Dwight Howard. So you may sit here and say they may have had more athletic 7-foot bigs, where now you have a undersized guy who really can't defend bigger guys, but can score. Because remember, JaVale and Dwight really weren't scorers, but Montrezl can score. And then Marc Gasol can be a defensive guy, obviously not as athletic, but if you go against a bigger team, you can put him out there. He can still be just effective and can shoot the ball from 3. So it makes me think the Lakers might change the way they play a little bit in that regard because of that, because of those changes that were made. But we don't really know what moves they're probably going to end up making, but they might. They also are keeping Markieff Morris. Remember, he was deciding between the Clippers and joining his brother or going back to the Lakers, and he ended up choosing the Lakers. He ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to stick it with the Lakers. We're going to run it back. We're going to try to go for his repeat. And, I think that's a good move. The Clippers may have felt like, well, we have the Morris twins. Because Markieff Morris, people forget as well, was a very key part of what the Lakers were able to do down the stretch. And so, especially in the playoffs, especially that Western Conference finals, he played some really good basketball. And so I think keeping him, you really got your rotation of bigs. You have Montrezl. You have Jordan Bell. People forget Jordan Bell is a very athletic center. Marc Gasol. You have Markieff Morris. You got a pretty good, function in the bigs. Now, if we look at this Lakers roster, now we're going to break it down position by position. From a guard position, they have Dennis Schroeder, Alex Caruso, KCP, because he re-signed. Wesley Matthews, a very underrated signing. They lost Avery Bradley, and they needed someone who could come in and really feel that role that Avery Bradley was going to feel. Wesley Matthews, depending on how you feel, can shoot. He's a 3-and-D guy. He can defend. You can put him on the best guard that on the opposing team's end, on the offensive end. And so he's somebody. And then Tyler Horton Tucker. Then for forwards, you got LeBron, AD, Kuzma. I'll talk about Kuzma in a minute. Montrezl Harrell, Markieff Morris, Alfonso McKinney, and Kostas Akinokumbo, Giannis' brother. And at center, you have Marc Gasol, Jordan Bell, and Devontae Kayuk. So now people are wondering what's going to happen with Kyle Kuzma. I've had some discussions with some people about Kyle Kuzma. A lot of Laker fans, I feel like, have soured on Kyle Kuzma. They feel like Kyle Kuzma should move. They feel like he should be looking for a way out of LA. And for me, if Kuzma really wants to get paid, because we've heard Kuzma kind of was jacking up shots and doing what he was doing because he was still trying to get numbers to look good so a team would pay him. Now, to me, at this rate, with the moves they've made, it does somewhat feel like Kyle Kuzma's minutes could even be more cut in half. Because I would feel like your top 8 guys would probably be Schroeder, Caruso, LeBron, AD, probably Trez in there as well. Because we'll see who's starting at center. They might start Marc Gasol at center, so that'd be 6. That's your top 6 guys. Then KCP, that's your 7th guy. And then Markieff Morris. So I feel like that would be their top 8 people. So now Kuzma's sliding into like the bottom 7 of the roster. If you think about it, he's kind of becoming the bottom 7. And that means his minutes might not be there. And then you got Wesley Matthews. So you got 4 guys in the guards. You got LeBron, AD, Harold, Morris. That's 8. That's 8 guys. And we haven't even said Marc Gasol yet. That's 9. And then maybe 10th would be Kyle Kuzma. So then, yeah, if they have a whole second unit out there, he'll play. But it's just kind of like, where is he going to get even the minutes he got this past year to me? With all these moves. They have a lot of forwards on this roster. So if I'm the Lakers, I'm curious to see, or as me in general, I am curious to see, are they moving off of Kyle Kuzma this offseason? Because remember, they can wait till the trade deadline to make that move. But to me, if I'm Kuzma, I feel like my minutes are about to be cut again. And if that's about to happen, and now you'll barely see me play, and now I may be a crunch time player, in terms of, not crunch time, but a garbage time player, you might need to seriously say, hey, I need to get out of here. Like, really? Because where are your minutes going to come? Remember, Kuzma at times last year was ending games with the starting lineup because of his shooting and his prowess, because he could score. But with the additions they've made, especially with the addition of Markieff Morris staying and then adding Montrez, I feel like they would want to go with an AD Montrez down the stretch, then LeBron at the 3, and then maybe Schroeder at 1, and then you could have either KCP, Wesley Matthews, or Caruso. So where's Kuzma going to fit in? So if I'm Kuzma, I might be looking to leave. I might be looking to dip out of LA, find a team where he can really flourish like Brandon Ingram did when he went to the Pelicans, and then try to make his money. I feel like he's trying not to be outspoken. That's why he hasn't said too much. But I feel like you can tell through the way he plays that he's trying to be a certain way, and I feel like his minutes are about to be cut, so I don't know if the Lakers... Actually, I pretty much am firmly believing the Lakers are not the best stop for Kuzma anymore, and I think he needs to be trying to seek a way out of LA. But we'll see if he actually tries to do something like that. But that's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get to some more free agent talk. We're going to get into the Atlanta Hawks. We're going to get into some other underrated moves, some players that stayed with their opposing teams right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed the moves that defending champions made, because they made a lot of moves, and they look really good. Now, losing Avery Bradley, losing Dwight Howard, could be big in terms of what they meant to last year's team. But to me, you always have to reinvent yourself. You have to reinvent yourself as a team, where now this year's team could still be just as effective than last year's team. They still can play smaller big, so they still have that ability, but they may have to play a different style of basketball. Like I said, adding someone like a Marc Gasol, you're really not going to play him in fast break situations. And to be honest, I feel like Marc Gasol may not play that much depending on who they're playing. They're going to play a lineup according to who they're playing. And I think with Montrez there, that's why I think he was such a big pickup. Because with Montrez, they now have a guy where if they have to go small, can still drop 20 on your head, and they feel comfortable putting him out there against a smaller lineup, knowing he can defend guys like that. And we can put AD on the bigger guy if we have to. So they have that flexibility, where on the Clippers, I mean, unless you're talking about, Zubac, they really ain't got no big guys to throw at him, so it had to be Montrez. And you saw how that went against Denver. But now we're going to get into a team, my home team, man. I don't talk too much about the Hawks on the podcast. Obviously I don't want to come off as a homer here on the podcast. And my superiors would prefer me not to do it like every episode. But I got to talk about them. They've made a lot of moves. They were very active in free agency. The Atlanta Hawks have made a lot of moves. Now, they haven't been a great team the last 2 years. Really, the last 3. And they haven't made the playoffs, haven't been close. But they are now in a win-now mode. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. They are now looking to be a win-now team. Now, when we say win-now, people think championship. I think everybody and their mama know the Hawks ain't going to the finals this year. So that's not what this means. But just making that upgrade from being a team at the bottom of the barrel and being a team that's considered one of the worst 10 or worst 5 in the league to now being considered in the top 16, which is playoff teams, is a big jump. Is a jump that you would want. It makes people want to invest into this team in that situation. And so we all know about Trae Young. 30 and 10, one of the best scorers in the league already. I feel like he has modeled some of his game after James Harden. If you watch Hawk games at all this year, the way he drew fouls was James Harden-esque. And that's why I think he was able to average 30 a game. He is definitely, I'm sure he's working on his game. He's going into his third year. Now, we heard reports last year in Atlanta that Trae was, when they started losing, when John Collins was suspended, he was getting a little frustrated. So the Hawks, I'm sure, are aware we start winning. Because there was even maybe concern, would he even sign that first big contract back with Atlanta? They've added Rajon Rondo, defending champion from the Lakers. He brings veteran leadership. He brings Rondo's a dog. He's someone who will get up there, disrupt teams. He's smaller, but he's a very disruptive guy. Usually when you're a smaller player, you have to be disruptive. You have to make bigger players feel uncomfortable. It's almost like you have to go for the ball a lot. Make him feel like, ooh, all right, I gotta make a quick move on him. And then we know what type of playmaking ability Rondo has. And I think him helping mentor Trae. Because Trae, we know, is a great scorer. And Rondo's not going to help him there. And Trey's a good passer as well, but maybe seeing things he didn't see before, maybe learning how to play better defense as a smaller player is something Trey can take from Rajon. And that can improve his game, make him a better player. Because now, if Trae Young can maybe be average a little bit more in steals, someone that, hey, you can still get it on Trae, but he gonna fight you. That's better than, if you go to Trae, there's no fight and you can have your way with him any second, any day, any possession, And so Rajon Rondo is going to be big for that, and just being a veteran leader, because that's one thing the Hawks were looking at this entire offseason. They needed more veteran leadership. They really didn't have, outside of Vince Carter, they really didn't have a lot of veteran leadership on the team. It was a lot of young guys. And then it was just Pierce trying to teach them. They've made growth. We've seen improvement. We know. But they need that veteran leadership that knows how to play in big games, knows how to win, and can play well. So far, you could say their biggest signing is Danilo Gallinari. They signed him to a 3-year, $61 million contract, about $20 a year. Gallinari is 32. A lot of people are wondering, why would they pay this money to a 32-year-old, especially a guy who's playing the same position as John Collins? Well, we'll get to in a minute. But, Gallinari is a guy who, he's always been a good scorer. People have never thought about Gallinari as a scorer, but he's a good scorer. We just don't think about him like that. Like, really, we don't think about Gallinari like that. Because we know him for having injuries in New York, in Denver, and in Thunder last year was really the first time he was healthy, like, most of the season. And so for me, with that being known, if he can stay healthy for the Hawks, he gives them a guy who can average 18, maybe 20 points a game and can stretch the floor. We know Gallinari is a good, very good three-point shooter. Then they added Chris Dunn. I think this is one of the most underrated signings the Hawks had. Because Chris Dunn is a guy who, he's a very good defender. Chris Dunn will defend. And he can give you some buckets on the other end. And I think he's the help. Because think about it. Trae Young and Rajon Rondo, I believe, are both 6'1". Chris Dunn is taller. Chris Dunn is 6'3". So you may think that's only 2 inches. Remember, inches make a big difference. 6'3" is around an average height for a point guard. I would think 6'3", 6'4". So he's a guy he's a little bigger, can defend, a bit stronger guy. So he's going to help out definitely in that backcourt. And then they have just signed Bogdanović to an offer sheet. And the expectation is that the Kings won't match, and he'll become an Atlanta Hawk. So now you've added one of the best 3-and-D guys in the game, a guy who can make big shots and stretch the floor. Now, if you look at this Hawks team, we're just talking about the free agent distance. Remember, they still have Cam Reddish. Some people think he has star potential coming back for his second year. Really came on at the end of last year. You have DeAndre Hunter. To me, I've always said DeAndre Hunter is what he is. He can get you about 10 to 15, depending on the year. He's a guy who defends. He's going to be a 3-and-D guy in this game. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's a guy who can defend, and he can get you a bucket here and there. You still got John Collins, which that's the big talking point right now in Atlanta. People, I hear a lot of fans in Atlanta and a lot of sport outlets. They would prefer the Hawks keep John Collins and go ahead and pay him because he's still young. He's gave you 20 and 10 every year except his first year in the league. And, he's really improved his game. He can shoot the three now. He's very athletic, as we can tell. A guy who can get a shot off. He's been the second best offensive player while Trey's been there. Now, he is a liability defensively. He's not the best defender. He's athletic. He's one of those guys where if you're just talking about perimeter defense and post defense, that's not his strength. But he can block shots because he's athletic enough to do that. He just isn't someone who just man one-on-one is just a good defender. And so a lot of people hope the Hawks still are willing to sign him because we're hearing that we're trying to get him at the right number. And the question is, what do the Hawks feel like John Collins is worth? That's the big question here in Atlanta. Because John Collins is 24, I believe. I think he's 24, 25 right now. And a guy who averages 20 and 10, can shoot the three ball, young, athletic. and can hit the three, a lot of teams would want him. So they could get some good, value for him if they wanted to trade him because he is a younger guy. Now, obviously, if you trade for John, you have to be willing to pay him. But it's going to be interesting because I think, especially with also Clint Capella being there, who we haven't actually seen play since when he got traded there, he was hurt, and then the COVID and the season stopped, and the Hawks didn't play in the restart. We don't even know how Clint Capella fits in with the team. And so now it's like, okay, well, with John Collins there, how will he fit in with all those guys? Because the forward position is kind of stacked there in Atlanta. And so we're going to have to see what moves the Hawks. Again, the Hawks, I feel like a lot of teams are going to do this with some players. And this is what I think the Lakers are going to do with Kuzma. With the season right around the corner, and the trade deadline still going to be basically a couple months after that, you might see teams just kind of, okay, let's just see how this next month or two goes with this player, with this team. If it doesn't look like it's going to work, if he's unhappy, then we know, okay, we're going to go ahead, try to see if we can move him. But they're not necessarily in a rush to move him at this second unless he makes it clear at this second, hey, I want to go. So we're going to have to see what they decide to do when it comes to, the decision. So we'll have to see what happens, because I think a lot of people, like I said, will be interested in getting John Collins until the Hawks make him available, because he's going to be the player that everyone's going to watch for, since he's the one who's wanting the extension, and it seems like the Hawks are resistant to give him that max extension that he's looking for. Now we're going to get into the Clippers before we get here for this segment. So the Clippers have lost some guys, but they haven't really been active in bringing in guys either. It seems like, for the most part, from what we've heard, is they're going to probably run it back. They might still sign some guys later to fill out the roster, but it seems like they're probably going to run it back. Now, people were talking about them getting Rajon Rondo. We clearly saw Rajon Rondo went after the money, went to Atlanta. They lost Harold to the Lakers. But they did add a guy, Serge Ibaka. He has agreed to go to the Clippers. So he, to me, some people wonder, is this an upgrade or a downgrade from Montrez? Now, here's the upgrade when it comes to those two players. Ibaka is a better defender than Harold. Ibaka can guard bigger players. So he can go against an AD and bang. He can go against a Gasol and bang. He can go against even Montrez himself and bang. And he has shot blocking ability. So he improves them from a defensive end. And he's not as gifted of a scorer as Harold, who can go out, dominate you in the paint, go 10 for 10 and get you 20 points, 24 points. Ibaka can have a game like that, but he'll probably get you more between 14 to 15. Maybe a couple of three threes, a couple, maybe a putback here, a layup here, a post up here. He could get you something, but it's not going to be as efficient as maybe Montrez is. So offensively, they may have went down slightly, but not a ton, because Ibaka can stretch the floor, and that might help with spacing, because Ibaka can hit three, where Harold was more of an inside the paint kind of guy. So again, this is a good move for them. They needed to make a move. They had to get somebody, especially after losing Montrez. They had to. Remember, people were thinking Montrez was going to get paid big money, and then you saw what he got paid. So to me, I feel like they were able to get Ibaka for a good price. And I think if you're the Clippers, you shouldn't be done yet. I think you still need to be looking to say, okay, who else can we go after? Who else can we improve? They said they needed a playmaking point guard. They still haven't gotten him. So who is it out there on the market that you might want to go for? Fred VanVleet's off the table. So look at them maybe getting a cheaper point guard alternative who is a good, playmaker potential guy. Because they're looking to upgrade point. Kawhi has told Ballmer, we need to upgrade point. And so we're going to see. Because if they don't upgrade point, and then Kawhi's playing I have to bring the basketball up type of thing, listen, we know for the Clippers, if they don't do better, and if Kawhi and Paul George aren't happy, a lot of people are thinking they'll leave. So you would think the Clippers want to at least attempt to get somebody to appease him and then see how the season plays out. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that, but I think Serge Ibaka is a good pickup for them. It gives them some plus minuses with Harold, and I think that, I do feel like their team still does help them in the long run. But that's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to talk about John Wall. John Wall requesting a trade from Washington. We're going to discuss that, plus other free agency news, all that right here and more on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed the Atlanta Hawks. They were very active this free agency, making a lot of moves, looking like a perennial playoff team now with all the moves they've made. They have a great mixture of young, up-and-coming talent with Trae Young, their star, with now bringing better leadership of Rajon Rondo, Danilo Gallinari, bringing in guys. Still got Clint Capella. He hasn't played yet, so we can throw him in there. Chris Dunn, about to get Bogdan Bogdanovic. I mean, that's a lot of guys that they're bringing in, and it looks like the Hawks are looking towards making a playoff push this year with Trae Young leading the charge. And so I think the Hawks are going to be one of the more interesting teams to see play this year in the league. So we're going to have to see how it all turns out. We also talk about the Clippers signing Serge Ibaka. They've lost some people. They still have some needs they need to have filled. They still need a point guard. We'll see if they're going to still make any moves. We're still, first few days. We still have some good free agents out there. So we're not going to sit here and make it seem like they're just going to go into the season stand pat. But adding Serge Ibaka to me was a move they needed to make with losing Montrezl Harrell. Gives them a guy who can now defend bigger guys, can shot block, can stretch the floor, and still give them some production. So that's going to be interesting to see how everything turns out with them. But now we're going to get into a player who hasn't played in a couple of years and now has requested a trade by reports. John Wall has requested to be traded. This broke the first, I believe, 24 to 48 hours after free agency started. He has requested a trade from the Washington Wizards. It is reported that he is requested to leave. So some people are wondering how real this report is, because the thing about this trade that I think we have to look at here is that the Wizards GM said that's not true. Tommy Shepard said they have not been told by John Wall he wants a trade, nor is there a plan to trade. So clearly you can tell they're like, no, that's not the case. Now, John Wall, like I said, hasn't played in a while. There were rumors that the Rockets and the Wizards were discussing a trade, trading their 2-point guards. And giving, I guess, thinking, okay, we'll give you our point guard for ours. But the Rockets wanted more, not just a straight-up swap. Now, Shams Charania is the one who reported that those talks stalled because of the fact John Wall made it out of Washington, which usually when Shams says something, most of the time, 97% of the time, he's usually spot on. He said that, listen, he wants out. But the thing is, you would think, well, how would that affect that trade? Well, remember, the Wizards might have been making that trade for their convenience. Doesn't mean John necessarily wanted to go there. John may want out and want to go somewhere else. Because maybe John Wall was offended, thinking to himself, I haven't played in 2 years. I was your franchise player. I literally get back. I'm going to play this season for you guys. I thought we were going to try it with me and Bradley Beal. We're going to try to see how this works, see if we can win. And then the first thing y'all do is discuss the trading me for Russell Westbrook. I can kind of understand why he may want to feel like, hey, I might need to move, because you basically, to him, he may feel disrespected by that, thinking, why are y'all wanting to move me so quickly? Knowing that I'm still here, knowing that, you know, I'm supposed to, like, run it back with Bradley Beal. Because, you know, the Wizards have been adamant this entire offseason, even for during the end season. We're not trading Bradley Beal. We're not trading Bradley Beal. We're not trading Bradley Beal. And then John Wall's like, okay, well, I'm back. Beal said, okay, let's give it another shot. And then Wizards are like, well, we might want to trade John for Russell. I don't see how they would get better because of that deal. Do you? I mean, I don't really know who wins that. I guess the Houston, just because if they did get more back than just a straight up swap, well, they got more. So I guess you could say that was the better deal. But still. So I understand why John feels the way he does feel. You know, because he's like, well, if we're running it back and then you trade me, that completely goes against what you said. Because you got to think about it. Bradley Beal may sit here and think, okay, you know, yeah, sometimes me and John may have some issues playing together, but, you know, I recognize his talent. He recognizes my talent. And, you know, he's been out for a couple of years, so let's see what happens now. And then to come back and then tell Bradley Beal, oh, yeah, by the way, your new point guard is not even going to be John. It might be Russell Westbrook, who people look at universally as a very hard player to play with in terms of winning basketball. It's like, you sure that won't trigger Bradley Beal to maybe say, you know what, y'all got it. I might want to leave. So, definitely understand. We'll have to see if John Wall's on the move. Now, we know it's going to be hard to trade John Wall with his contract. That's been the biggest issue. They've discussed it for years when he first started getting hurt. It's hard to get him off this deal because of the fact he has so much money owed to him. He signed probably what some people consider one of the worst contracts in all of the NBA because of the money that is owed to him. So it's going to be extremely difficult for Washington to move John unless a team is willing to absorb that cap space hit. You never know. This might bring up a team. Could the Clippers maybe do it? I highly doubt it. Trying to bring John Wall's cap number with that team, probably not. Very far-fetched. I don't know. Maybe somebody might say PG-13 for John Wall. You know, PG-13 hasn't really done anything in the playoffs, so it's not like are you really losing that much if you trade Paul George for John Wall? You have a playmaking point guard in Kawhi Leonard instead of now having Patrick Beverley. Paul George, which you don't know if you're going to get playoff P or pandemic P, and then you got Kawhi. At least you know John, even in the playoffs, he played better than Paul George. Like, I mean, we're being honest here. John Wall's not going to sit out here and give you single-digit games and hit backboards and side. That might be a move the Clippers might need to explore. Maybe the Knicks, the Knicks still need a point guard. Could they, they were in discussions, would they trade for Russell Westbrook? Could the Knicks, John Wall is a big name, they can absorb that cap hit. They bring him in, you know what I'm saying? They bring him in. He's a part of that new RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, very young team. Basically what he would have been in Washington. Very young team, but got some guys. Maybe that's a move that could be explored. Maybe the Knicks do look into John Wall. Those are two teams right off the bat to me. That's something that we'll have to see if they want to go and do. To me, those are the two teams off the top of my head, unless they do make that swap with Houston, that might consider going down the path of pursuing John Wall. But we don't know if that's something they will actually end up doing. Speaking of guards, Fred VanVleet, there was a lot of rumors going into free agency that Fred VanVleet might be on the move. Some people thought the Raptors wouldn't be able to pay him the type of money that he wanted. But with Serge Ibaka basically leaving and Marc Gasol leaving as well, I think that freed up some cap and they were like, you know what? Fred VanVleet, out of the three of these players, are probably one of our most important players, if not our most important player. So they went ahead, paid him, I believe, 4 years, $84 million, I believe. And so Fred VanVleet is now back with the Raptors, getting paid his big money, getting paid what he need to do, doing what he need to do, and, hey, he deserves it. I've said this multiple times, that 4 years, $85 million to be exact. I have said this multiple times. And so on and so forth. So, Fred has just been an important part. He made the clutch shots. He made some of the biggest plays during that championship run. He has been a crucial part. Him and Kyle Lowry, to me, I think work very well together. Kyle Lowry sometimes doesn't have big scoring games. Sometimes he focuses more of his energy on the defensive end. But Fred VanVleet can come out, hit big shots, and pick up that offensive slack. And so, to me, I think that's something we got to look at and say, hey, this guy can play a bit. And so, I definitely am happy that he got his money. He deserved his money. And, we'll have to see what the Raptors do. They basically lost their front court, so we'll have to see what they do with that, what signings and stuff they agree to make. But they are definitely a good team, and I'm happy that they were able to do it. Another player going back to their respective team, Carmelo Anthony is going back to the Blazers. I believe this is the best move for Carmelo, as I believe the way the Blazers play. And they basically said, Carmelo, you can do what you do, and it won't affect the way we play our game. I think it's just the best situation. We heard rumors that Carmelo was considering maybe going back to New York. But it looks like he's staying in Portland. I think this is the best move for him. I think Portland, they're trying to get healthy. They feel like, hey, with a healthy team, let's see what we look like. So I think that's something that we have to keep an eye on. It's something we have to look at. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a guy who brings a lot to the table. And you saw when they needed scoring, if CJ was off or Damian was off, he could still score. Melo could still give you 20, 25 if he had to. He still got his mid-range. That's one thing Melo can do. He can score. He will always be someone who can score. And so that is something that, to me, if you can do that still, you will be absolutely fine in this game. You will be absolutely fine in this game. Because he can still give you something that can help you be successful. And then last story before we get out of here. The Knicks signed Austin Rivers. So he's left the Rockets too. I don't know if you're necessarily confident with Austin Rivers being your starting guard. I still don't think the Knicks may stick with Rivers right now. I've always had this thing. I wouldn't be surprised if players sign certain teams, or players sign certain players, or teams sign certain players, just to use them as trade bait later. Because I just think the Knicks still want a bigger name guard. There are some available, Russell, John out there. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe try to use Austin, maybe throw in Dennis Smith Jr. too, because he's still on the team, and maybe put some picks in there and think, hey, what can we get? We may also throw in somebody else, maybe Julius Randle, I don't know, potentially make that move. So, to me, obviously, some guys are staying, some guys are leaving, a lot of different things are happening. And, free agency has been very active so far, as it always is in the beginning of free agency. And a lot more moves will be planned to be made later. But that's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up next, we're actually going to get into some players who are currently on their current teams that got extensions. Speeda and Jason Tatum got paid. We'll discuss that. Plus, we'll discuss some of the remaining better free agents out there right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. So, last segment we discussed more big stuff. We discussed John Wall wanting out of Washington. Why I understand why he may want out based off the situation that's happening. Thinking he was going to come back, run it back with Bradley Beal, and now he's hearing that the team might want to let him go. He may sit there and say, well, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to stay with a team that may not even be fully committed to me? So I understand why John is heavily maybe considering, or has already, like they said, reportedly made it known he would like to leave Washington. We also discussed some guys who stayed. Fred VanVleet staying with Toronto, getting his money. Happy for him getting his money. Blazers keeping Melo. Melo still gets to, run it back with that Blazers team with Damian Lillard and CJ. Austin Rivers going to the Knicks. Knicks needed a guy. They got a guy. I don't know if he'll be a guy who's going to be a big part of what they do, but, good for him to find a place. So, and don't forget, he was one of those players that was reportedly not very happy within Houston. So, all that. So now we're going to get into a couple players who have been paid. Jason Tatum. Mr. Tatum getting paid big money. 5 years, $195. He's a big part of Boston. He solidified himself as a star this past year. People said he even was just hitting that ceiling of superstardom. Jason Tatum is an amazing player. A guy who looks like he'll be one of the best players in this league to come for the next decade. As long as, injuries, we all hope. Because he hasn't been injured a lot either. He's been relatively healthy throughout his first 3 years. And he deserves this money. They have made their commitment to Tatum. They said Tatum will probably be the guy going into the future who will lead us. He will be the guy going into the future who will be why we win a championship. We are going to center this team around him. He will be the guy that we will put all of our eggs in his basket, and we believe he can get us there. Because remember, in his first 3 years, he's made it to the Eastern Conference Finals twice. He was 1 game and then 2 games away from making it to the NBA Finals. So, the Boston has won with him as their best player. They have been close as the best player. Yes, you could still, like I said, say sometimes Tatum could do better in certain situations, but you could say that about so many different players. You could say that about so many different players if, they're going to do better, if things are going to be better. So for me, I feel like that it's going to really, to me, this was a move that you make to basically reaffirm, show the commitment, and let everybody know we are committed to him. We are committed to like him as a player. We are committed to him being the face of our organization moving forward. We are committed to him being the guy who will lead us into the promised land, into the future. And Jason Tatum definitely deserves that because he has done a lot for them. He has done a lot to get them where they are. And without him, we don't know where Boston would be right now. Him and Jaylen Brown, people consider Jaylen Brown an all-star player. A guy who has all-star potential. Maybe not the same superstar level as Tatum, but a guy who was also selected in that draft and was a part of that complete rebuild. So, we'll have to see what all happens with Jason Tatum for the next few years after signing this extension, but this is some big money he's made, and I know he's very happy about getting that paycheck even fatter, making around $40 million a year. So can't even get mad at it. Can't even be, can't even be upset about it. And then Donovan Mitchell also got a 5-year, $195 extension. We saw what happened in that playoff series against Denver, one of the best playoff series of the playoffs this year. He put on a show. You know, Donovan Mitchell is a guy who people always knew was a good player, but some people didn't know how great. Could he be your number one? Remember, like I said, Tatum has made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, while people would maybe say he was the best player. Donovan Mitchell, I don't believe they've made it to the second round. I believe they made it once while he has been there. But we can make the argument, the Western Conference is harder than the Eastern Conference. Utah hasn't had as good of teams as Boston has, all that. But especially this playoff series, you know, you can't sit here and say it was Mitchell's fault they lost. Mitchell balled out. Mitchell had huge games. He was the reason why he was able to get them to a 3-1 lead on the Denver Nuggets. He's made big plays in big moments. And so, for me, it definitely shows that the talent is there. He's good. He's ready to go. And he's a guy who you can't sleep on. A guy you have to look at and say, hey, he's pretty good. Now, he may never be that top of the line superstar player that everybody sits here and says, wow, he's going to be a top 5 player in this game. He may be a top 10 player. That may be what he is. A top 10 player. But that isn't bad. If you really think about it, it's not like he's had a player around his talent. If you honestly think about it, Utah has not had that second guy around his talent while he's been in Utah. And he's done what he's done. He's gotten his team to the playoffs. He's had big games. He's had big moments. And so we need to give him appreciation where appreciation is deserved. He deserves this money. I feel like we cannot truly judge Donovan Mitchell in terms of his winning success until you get him a player equal to him and then see where this Utah team goes. Then we can see, okay, is Utah really a good team? Can Donovan Mitchell take them far? Or is he maybe just a guy who will always be a really good player but never a great player in a lot of people's eyes? So we'll have to see how it all works out. So, now we're going to get into the top free agents available. We're also going to discuss some free agents that have also signed that I haven't mentioned as well. So, we all know Anthony Davis is still a free agent right now. They say in a report, actually, that just recently came out, that he is waiting to see what happens with Giannis' situation. Because they said if Giannis signs a supermax deal, he might go ahead and sign a long-term extension with the Lakers. But if Giannis does not sign a supermax deal and goes into the season without any commitment towards Milwaukee, they're saying that he might sign a 1+1 deal with the Lakers to then give the Lakers a chance to potentially go out and get Giannis in free agency next year. So that would be huge. I believe that was reported by or talked about by Ryan Windhorst on ESPN. So that would be huge that Anthony Davis is sitting here saying, hey, we might be able to get Giannis here too. So just in case he doesn't make that commitment, let me not make that commitment, tie cap space up into me and then keep us from getting him. Because maybe that's something him and LeBron have talked about. Hey, what if maybe you and me take a little less, and if Giannis doesn't commit, why can't we pursue Giannis? Now, I mean, obviously, everybody in the NBA would be like, oh, brother, LeBron's definitely, especially if they win a championship next year, that man going 3-peat, 4-peat, 5-peat with Giannis. Oh, boy. But it's just a question that you gotta, hey, you know, Anthony Davis thinking that far ahead saying, hey, why not? You know? We also have Brandon Ingram. He's a restricted free agent. He's expected to stay with the Pelicans. That's why I don't feel like any team's offered him anything. I think the Pelicans, when you have a restricted free agent like this, you kind of take your time because you're not really in a rush. It's not like, oh, he can walk tomorrow. Because really, if anything, if somebody tried to sign him to a max deal, the perception would be that the Pelicans would go ahead and re-sign with and go ahead and match the offer, whatever offer he gets. So Brandon Ingram's situation's pretty much been solidified. Gordon Hayward, we have to discuss him. He signed a 4-year, $120 million deal with the Charlotte Hornets. It's crazy. But Charlotte's a team who would give Gordon Hayward money like this because, listen, they just got LaMelo Ball. They got Gordon Hayward. They probably feel like with some of the young talent we have, we may be able to make a push towards being a playoff team. So I can understand them going ahead and giving him a big deal because they feel like, hey, we're getting a better team rounded up together. And I think, why not see what could happen? Christian Wood signed a 3-year, $41 million deal with the Houston Rockets. A guy who has showed, talent with Detroit, can hit the three, stretch big, can block shots. A lot of people wondering why isn't he on the team, committedly. Houston needed some big men. They got one of the better young big men out there in the game. He's only 25 years of age. So I think this is a really good pickup for Houston since they're trying to get a big guy. Joe Harris. But a lot of people thought the Nets were going to lose Joe Harris, but he re-signed with the Nets for $75 million for over 4 years. That's a big addition. Especially, I think the Nets are kind of moving a little bit away from the James Harden thing. Now, potentially, again, remember what I told you earlier. If they spark conversation, could Joe Harris now be in that discussion? That may be another guy you can throw in there. Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, Chris LeVert. Some picks, Jared Allen. It might be a more enticing deal in that situation. We'll have to see. Dragic agreed to stay with the Heat for 2 years, $37.4 million. So he looks like he'll probably, at 34 years old, maybe finish out his career with the Heat. We'll see. But I know Jimmy Butler definitely wanted him back because he understands how big of a part of the team he was. Jeremy Grant ended up leaving Denver and going into the Pistons for 3 years, $60 million. I guess Detroit didn't want to get up too high. Denver didn't want to go too high with their payment. He was a big part. He might be a big loss for them. And I know they were also trying to get Drew Holiday, and now we'll have to see where Denver looks because they lost one of their biggest pieces to the puzzle. This is going to put more on Michael Porter Jr. to develop this year because he might have to be that next guy. David Bertans, another guy that some people thought might leave, signed a 5-year, $80 million deal. This is one of the reasons why I hope they keep John and keep Bradley because we got to see what this team looks like with Bertans, with John, with Bradley, with the rookie from last year. They have some guys on that roster. Again, the Eastern Conference on the bottom half is looking more competitive in terms of teams. There's some guys, got some stars, got some good players down there. Eastern Conference could be a little bit more interesting next year. Just saying. Paul Millsap re-signed with Denver for a year and $10 million. Malik Beasley, he re-signed with the Timberwolves for 4 years, $60. Aaron Baines went over to Toronto for 2 years, $14.3 million. They had to replace Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka. Aaron Baines, 33, but still can play. Tristan Thompson leaves Cleveland for 2 years, $19 million. Basically the same deal Montrez signed. I don't know if people would say they're the same player, but clearly they're getting the same money. This could be one of those deals that maybe was affected by the fact that salary cap isn't as high as it would be. So now big men are not as valuable because now you got to think about it. You see where all the money is going in free agency with shooters. They're going to shooters. They're not going to big men. If you can shoot, you're getting paid. If you're a big guy who can't shoot, you're getting paid a certain amount. There's kind of becoming a cap for a guy who can't shoot but is a bigger guy. And so, that's something to me that we'll have to keep an eye on going forward. And we'll have to see if everything works out. So, those are some deals that have happened. Also, one last deal before we get out of here. Avery Bradley goes to the Miami Heat. They lost Jay Crowder, but they added him to the backcourt with Jimmy Butler and Goran Dragic. A guy who fits the Miami, mold, and a guy that I think is going to do big things for them. But that's all the time we have here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you once again for being part of the show, letting me be part of your day, listening to me talk about all things basketball with you guys. Don't forget to follow us on social media, especially Twitter, at GSMC_basketball. Also, don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. This is your host, Brice Lewis, saying have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.